Hello everybody. I have been wanting to do this video for a while to show you the difference between white pigments and resin, similar to the video I did on gold, but this time we're going to use all the different whites so that you can see how each type of color that you use in resin makes a huge difference when it comes to what it is you're trying to accomplish. So I took these and I'll show you the sped up. These I just purchased at a craft store, and I just made ocean colors on them so that our white shows up really well for the video. Plus they're pretty. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and prep, and I'll be doing each board separately, but I'm going to prep with clear, and then I will talk you through which ones I'm using. Cheddar will be accompanying me today as we go through this tutorial, so you may hear his little cheddary laughter and discussion, so I apologize for that. He's purring right now. So we have prepped our board, and I've had questions on the ratios that I use to mix the colors, and I'm always a little bit ashamed to say that I don't really measure. I can't say specifically how much paint or color I put in, but it's not very much. So I typically use, and you'll see me in pretty much all my videos using these little cups that hold 3 ounces, and I usually never fill them up more than this far, depending on how much of the color I need. So that will give you an idea right away. So we are going to go ahead and mix. We're going to start with acrylic paint and acrylic ink. So, and then I'm going to put some mica in it. I'll be using this mica today, so that you can see how the acrylic looks with sparkle, and then so we'll go through them. So the first thing I do is I put a little bit of resin inside the cup for each cup. And then all it takes is a little block of paint. If you put too much paint inside, it will get this bubbly effect, and it'll actually sometimes bubble up and look like a souffle. And that's the type of thing that will make your resin when it cures, because sometimes even if it's thick, you can still use it. I mean, it still gets in the resin and it does neat things. But when your resin cures, it's going to have like a pooled skin kind of look on the top of it. And as a beginner, when I was a beginner, all I would do would be to put clear over the top to hide that. But that is what will happen if you put too much paint in here. So as you can see, it's very, I put a little bit of paint in there, and it's completely opaque. You can't see through it. It's got a nice consistency. And then I will be using the ink. So the acrylic ink is just another way of doing white, and I use both, and I honestly don't have a preference. The white acrylic ink came with all the colors that I really wanted, so I typically use Castin'craft because I have the for what I want to do, the Castin'craft has the better effect for me, plus I'm used to working with it. So today I'm just going to show you this because I have it, and as you saw, I put a couple drops in there, and it's going to take more because it's a little bit see-through. And the stopper isn't working, so I'm just going to pour a little bit. There we go. Now, there are definitely a lot of acrylic paints that have a shimmer effect to it. But today we're going to put our own shimmer effect so that you can see how it looks. Okay, so we're going to start with the paint, and I just used a basics acrylic titanium white. It'd be easy to remember. And I'm going to put the white in strings along this way. And I'm going to try to be as consistent with them as possible so that you get the full effect of how much they react in there. How thin of a string I put should be the same for all of them, so you get a good idea. And okay. Heat gun I'll be using. I'm going to use, I call these, you know, wedding cakes, the little wedding cake tip. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to start on low. Is acrylic paint. Trust me, if I tried to put him somewhere, he would throw a tantrum. So he really needs to be involved in everything that I'm doing. We have the garage door open, so I know that they're doing construction outside. So I'm sorry if that interferes with the noise of this video, so, along with the Cheddar Man. So this is the acrylic ink, and it is thinner. I mean, because it's not paint. Hush. Come over here, sit there. Okay. I know, you're right. You're right about everything. Okay. So that's the ink. And I'm going to use the same heat gun on low, same tip. I'm going to use the same tip for the whole video. Now using a torch will actually assist with bringing out some of the potential cells that come up or the lacing effects. And between these two, even though it's acrylic coloring, I think that the ink has more of a smoky looking effect or foggy looking effect. It's still, they're both really pretty, and they both have very distinct differences to them. But plain acrylic, as you can see, plain acrylic whites can get that, you can achieve a lacing effect or a wave-like effect. It's just a little more subtle, at least with the heating gun that I'm using today. So now I'm going to take the acrylic paint, and I have some really beautiful mica powder, and it's from Hippie Crafts, and I'll be putting links for everything I use. And I like this one because of how fine it is. It's not going to have big chunky mica flakes in it. So I'm going to put this inside the acrylic paint mixture, and then we'll come back and put that in the ink. I'm going to pull it out a little bit further so that it doesn't mess with the last wave that I did. You can see when I blow them, when I blow one wave, it also affects the first wave that I did. It doesn't ruin the effect, but you be careful about, you know, what you're going for when you put your spacing down. So this is acrylic ink and mica powdered. Sorry, that's acrylic paint and mica powder. Okay. So there's a distinct shimmer, and when these are cured, you know, I'll pick them up so you can get a good look at, you know, how they shimmer in the light. But you can see that mica is almost like a vehicle. It kind of helps drag the color back out further into your resin, or yeah, into the clear resin, and it's a super pretty effect, but we'll see how that cures. Oops, it looks like I lost you there. So what I did was I went ahead and I mixed the acrylic ink with that same hippie crafter mica powder, and I did this line, so we're going to do another one just so that you can see the effects of it while I'm doing it. Mica. Once you put the ink on the clear, it's so thin that it's a little bit tricky to get the ink to move when you're blowing it in the direction, when you're blowing it in this wave-like pattern that I'm doing. But it still has a neat effect. It's a little bit smoky. Try to get a good, once these cure, I will show you so that you can get a good look at them. So now I'm going to prep the next board, and we will do pigment paste. Okay, so now we're going to do pigment paste. Now I put clear on here, which I did earlier, so I won't show you every time. You get the drift. So I used this pigment paste in my heat gun tips video, and I mean, it was actually did it the day I received it in the mail. Super excited. So when you get or use pigment paste, you really need to make sure that you stir it up. It's a if you don't, for some reason, it just doesn't work as well. So I give it a good stir before I put it in the resin. And then all I do is because you can see how thick it is, and some are thicker than others. I just take the tip of my stick and I stir it into the resin, so I don't try and scoop it in. I just get it on my stick. So let me get some resin in here. I'm going to take about this much. Just stir it in. And I find that I have to stir pigment paste up more, probably because it's thicker, the nature of it, to make sure that it gets fully mixed in there. And if I don't, and you can see this also in my heat gun tips video, it'll do little flakes of color. I mean, it won't, so you have to be patient, take the time to mix it really well. And I love this pigment paste, so I've used it in a couple of my projects. Okay. Let me put the lid on that. I'm gonna make try to make the same size stripes as, you know, across the board, so that you really get an idea of how the colors interact. And pigment paste can be very vivacious, and so I'm trying to make them as uniform as possible so you get a good idea. And you notice that after I do this, I always run the torch over the color real quick to heat it up, because it does actually make it move smoother when I'm blowing it. So I'm going to do the heat gun on low again. And then hit it with the torch again. Okay. So this is pigment paste. And this over here is your acrylic paint. And ink. So I've been wanting to try this in my last video, or my gold video, the video on the best golds to use for resin. Somebody made a fabulous comment about making your own pigment paste, and what she said is to take the actual resin part of your resin. So you've got, you know, part A and part B. For my resin, part A is the resin, and then part B is the hardener. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, put it in a cup, and I'm just going to do a block because we don't need a whole lot. There we go. And then I'm going to mix in some acrylic paint. Now, when you do this, they recommend that you use the same, if you're going to make your own pigment paste, use the same resin in your paste that you're using on your project for the best effect. Hello, Cheddar. I just did a drive-by. Okay. And this does feel, it's thick, but that's also, you know, going to be potentially based on how thick your own resin is, the resin that you use. Okay. So torch. It definitely has a thickness to it. You can see that. But I am not off put. It feels good. It feels like a good thing to do. Go. It actually looks really good. It mixed well. Try and get that focused. There we go. And so this one is titanium white, just resin pigment paste, and this is acrylic paint mixed in the resin, my actual resin part A. It's pretty cool. Struggling with the camera just a little bit. So, because I'm curious now, there we go. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put some mica in it. Now this is my mixture. I didn't put it in the just resin, so this is just resin part A with a little bit of acrylic paint and some mica powder. Let's see how that does. It is a little bit harder for me to get this onto my project. It's very thick, so that could just be that I need to put some more of my part A resin in it just to see, but resin itself is pretty thick, so we're just going to go with what we have. But overall, this is really cool. You could do this with anything. Okay. Now, I can't see that it made a difference to put that shimmer in there. It might be that it was too thick, but we'll probably be able to see it a little bit better when I can pick this up and bend it toward the light and get a better look at it. But it looks the same to me, even with the shimmer powder added to it. So we'll see when we get the cure. Looks the same, and it might just be because of the thickness, so, or I didn't put enough in there, or maybe I need to use a bigger flake mica potentially, but it's definitely thick. It's very cool. Okay, so I apologize for the blur. I'm having a hard time with it. Okay, so now I'm going to do the next board, and we're going to do Castin'craft and then Castin'craft with alcohol ink. So let's see the difference between those two. Okay, starting with Castin'craft, which I really love, by the way. I'm going to use my dirty bottle. I just wanted you to be able to see it with the clean one. I usually just put a little tiny dot about that big. A little bit of this goes a long way. And usually when you're working with white, I'm not ever going to be using a lot more than, you know, about this much in my cup, because white is extremely startling in your project, so usually you kind of use just a little bit of it. So Castin'craft definitely mixes thinner than a pigment paste does. Goes on easy too. Now most colors that when you're doing these, definitely change as they sit there. In the case of the pigment paste, you can see that the cells widened. And in the acrylic inks, they kind of spread out a little bit more, but they didn't really change that much. So now we're going to add a little bit of alcohol ink to this Castin'craft. I usually only add a couple drops of 4 to 6 drops of alcohol ink to the mixture, because I think it's an enhancer, you know. So we'll see if I can get my alcohol ink open. Here we go. So that's it. So we have Castin'craft without alcohol ink. And with. So we'll let that sit there and do what it's going to do. See if it makes a big difference between the two of them. Still really pretty effect. And then next I want to do alcohol ink. Usually you'll see me put the alcohol ink in a little container when I'm working with it, because dropping it directly onto the resin will alcohol acts as a catalyst, so it just immediately spreads out. And if you're trying to control your design just a little bit, I wouldn't recommend dropping the alcohol ink directly onto. So I'll take something flat like my little spatula. Just with it. Trying to not be blurry here. Okay. Put it in like this, and I'll do a streak. And this does take a little bit of patience because it's essentially like you're drawing in the resin. See how the alcohol ink has this really neat effect on when it drops in. So then you can take a heating gun and I'll put it on low. Once you run the heating gun over it though, you can't really run it back across again, or it will kind of obliterate the design that you made. What's sitting on the top, and I'll show you this tomorrow, alcohol ink sits on the top of resin just a little bit differently than standard, putting in mixtures of paint. So we'll see how these look tomorrow, and then I don't know why I can't get this to be less blurry. I apologize for that. So we have our Castin'craft with alcohol ink, and you can actually see there's a little bit of a difference there as it sits. This is just alcohol ink that I dabbed into the resin. Pigment paste, and then this is our own mixture of pigment paste right here. And that's the same mixture that I made, but I put in some shimmer powder, so we'll see tomorrow how that sits. And then this board is plain white acrylic paint mixed with resin, acrylic ink mixed with resin right here, and then I put some shimmer powder in the acrylic paint, and then these are shimmer powder and the acrylic ink. So we will come back tomorrow and see how those turn out. And Mr. Cheddar Man, I might be able to hear him purring down there, is waiting patiently for us to be done, huh? We will see you tomorrow. So I'm going to pull out my throw away the spiral galaxies, you know, that I didn't like. And let's do some waves, but let's do it in the way that you give yourself a lip of resin. So I'm going to do, I'm going to pick from what we did yesterday, and I'm going to do mica powder, just mica powder, because I forgot to do that one. I'm going to do the acrylic paint again, but this time I'm going to put a couple drops of alcohol ink in it because I want to see how that does, because I thought we should try that. I was thinking about it last night. This is the pigment paste, the Just Resin pigment paste, and then this is the Castin'craft with a couple drops of alcohol ink in it. And that's Cheddar. He says hi. Goopy guy. So when I'm doing layered beach coasters, I usually give myself a little lip for the first, you know, as I stack up the layers. And I do that because it gives me a lot more control over where the wave is going to hit on the board. So I don't want the wave going onto my little beach. But it also really helps deliver the resin through the clear. So because you can get oh, that's my hair, sorry. You can get the resin at an angle, and so you can get a better effect on how the resin flows through your how you get the white to intermix. So this is just mica powder. I'm kind of curious to see how it looks, because typically when we do mica powders, they kind of disperse and they're really all over the place. So I'm going to use the same tip, the same small wedding cake tip on all of our tries today. So I don't have any resin on this part at all. So you see how pretty that effect is. So it kind of having a lip of resin like this really gives you a good shot at pushing the resin through the clear in a way that gives you these types of effects. That was the mica. Next, let's do the pigment paste. Oh no, let's do the acrylic and the couple drops of alcohol ink. Acrylic paint and alcohol ink, and I did the same type of mixture. I put in, you know, a dollop of the alcohol ink, of the acrylic ink, and then I put about 4 to 6 drops of alcohol ink. I typically try shoot to do 4 drops, but then I have a difficult time because the ink comes out so fast. But I haven't really found a difference between 4 and 6. And this is the Just Resin pigment paste. And this is the Castin'craft with the alcoholic drops. Done. Cheddar's down there purring. So I think that all of these have extremely beautiful effects to them, but I wanted to do it like this too, just so you could kind of see. This is a much thicker bit of resin to be pushing the color through, and you can even see where afterwards the clear fell this way, so the color kind of did this little overlap, and it looks really neat because this is all that's left right here of the part that I did not put the clear on. So this is thinner, so the Castin'craft is thinner than the pigment paste, which kind of stayed put a little bit, but you can still see that the effects are a little bit more defined on this one. I don't know, I think the plain acrylic paint and alcohol ink looks pretty good. There's less of the little cells popping up, but you can definitely see some pretty rippling. It's to me this almost looks like clouds. And this one on the end on the pigment paste looks more like a frothy water. And that's the Castin'craft. And then back to our mica. Look how pretty that is. To me this looks spacey. It looks a little bit like the moon. So I'm gonna let these sit overnight, and then I'll come back and we will do a recap of all of the white that we have cured, and hopefully you will have some really good ideas on what kind of whites you want to use on your projects. So we will see you then. We are back after we've let all of these cure so that we can have a final look at all of them. And I will start with our acrylic paint and inks, and then of course the mix of the mica powder that we did. So the first line that we did here was just acrylic paint. And then the second line was acrylic ink. And these cured almost exactly like what they look like when I blew them originally. And I still think that acrylic ink has a very neat wispiness to it, sort of like clouds. The acrylic paint actually has a really good look to it. So this line was acrylic paint mixed with mica powder. And I used the Hippie mica powder, which is extremely fine, and I'm having a difficult time picking up the shimmer in it, but it on the video, but it is there. There's a slight shimmer to it. I don't think that it made a whole lot of difference to how it affected the blow of the color, but I do see that it went a little bit higher. So I think that adding a little bit of the mica powder made it disperse a little bit more, but not in a bad way. You can see those. Gives them a little bit more detail. And then these bottom two are the acrylic ink mixed with mica, and I did 2 lines because I accidentally stopped videoing for that first line. And again, you can see how that acrylic paint or ink was sort of given more of a vehicle by the mica powder to kind of spread out a little bit more. So we go from here to adding a little bit of mica powder. And there is a bit of a shimmer on here, but I can't get it picked up by that camera. But definitely worth giving it a shot, or maybe even trying it with some bigger flaked mica powder. But I think this is a really stunning effect. It's very subtle. So I took that same mica powder and all we did was mica powder and clear resin. So I use this, it's very fine and beautiful, so it gives off a pearly effect, but it is white, and on the black it does give off a silvery look, but it also gave off a white look on this one. So mica powders will absolutely, because they have shimmer to them, they pick up the colors around them, and this is a really good example of that. So this is clear mixed with mica, and like I said yesterday, kind of has a moon or spacey effect to it. It's extremely beautiful. One thing I didn't do when I was making these coasters, but I do in my videos, is sometimes if you want this to be a clean line, you just take a Q-tip, a clean dry Q-tip, and you shape your line the way you want to shape it. I didn't do that for the purposes of just showing the effects of these, but I wish I had, just so you could see. It's once you have this edge, you can pretty much make it, or you can even put more acrylic or more of your color on the line to make it thicker if you want, once you've done your blow, but you can definitely manipulate this after you've blown it. Our next board is the pigment paste. So our first line was the Just Resin pigment paste. And you can see there, I really love how blowing it into the clear so that it sits on top of the blue gives it a really beautiful three-dimensional effect. And you can see that pigment paste sits a little bit thicker once you put it on your resin. It kind of sits in there, and it almost looks like everything at the start of where you poured it pulls out this way, and then it stays. And I have a video where I show you that, you know, color sinks to the bottom of resin, and sometimes once it's there, it's hard to get it to move. Pigment paste automatically does that to some degree, but it's more than willing to give you effects. You can see here where it had some beautiful effects just where it had landed in the resin. The next two lines are our homemade pigment paste, and I do believe that because they look really feathery, that I need to get down the mixture a little bit better, because while I was doing this board, I picked it up and I tilted it just a little, and I think that it had better cells until I did that. And it's always a rule of thumb when you're blowing wavy lines, not to mess with it right after you've blown it. So just remember that. I think that this has extremely good potential, and I can tell that I poured it or didn't mix it because you can see how it ripples on the top of the resin right there. I can tell that I need to get the mixture a little bit down pat, because this is what happens when you mix color into your resin and you don't do it quite right. But it's like I said earlier, you could actually put a clear coat on top of that and it would hide it. But why, unless you have to? As you can see, the Just resin is glassy, the cured glassy, and then you have our homemade, which did not cure glassy, but still good effects. It's just, I think, something we need to work with. It has very similar effects. And then this one, I had put some pigment paste in, and because I think I mixed it so thick, you can't really see that pigment paste, that mica powder. So I took our homemade and I put mica powder in it for this version, and I think I just need to get this mixture down a little bit better, because you can't see the shimmer, probably because it was so thick. So we had taken the part A of my resin, part A, part B, the resin part of it, and mixed it with some acrylic paint. And I think that that's a fabulous idea, but I need to get the mixture down. So I have to play with that a little bit, see how it goes. So then, just to show how pigment paste looks when you blow it through a wave, we did the Just Resin pigment paste on this coaster here, and it still looks fabulous, just as fabulous as it did when I blew it. But I think it's kind of cool that up at the top of the coaster you've got like these little ghost cells that popped up like a little web right here. So that's pigment paste. Our final board, I did Castin'craft. And the first line was just plain Castin'craft, and the second line was Castin'craft with a little bit of alcohol ink. And I think that the differences are subtle. I don't think that if you really want, you don't have to do the alcohol ink, but the differences on this are that the alcohol ink seems to have kept the white congregated a little bit better, so you can see more of a defined white all the way to the top of the design, whereas the plain Castin'craft is almost a little bit smoky. It still has the exact same beautiful selling effects, but it doesn't stay together as much as it did on the mixture. So I think that you could go either way, whichever one you like the most. So the Castin'craft spread a little bit better without the alcohol ink, and then it just kind of stuck together and was a little more defined with the alcohol ink. So it's a beautiful effect one way or the other. And our final line on here was alcohol ink. Alcohol ink is difficult to work with in resin because when you drop it directly on, it has a catalyst effect. I did mention that, but in this way, I drew it in by dipping it into a flat spatula and then just making lines with it. And then I took a heat gun and on low setting, and I just blew it to make it give it a frothy look. And as you can see, it looks really neat. But one thing I didn't say when I was doing it is I use alcohol ink in resin, and rarely do I ever leave alcohol ink on top of my station because it's extremely flammable and it can burn invisible. It burns so hot. But I find with my resin, once the alcohol ink is in the resin, and it, like the way I drew it inside the resin, made sure it was inside the clear, it doesn't catch on fire. But that is, in this video, I'm using mirror clear resin. That's how it works in this resin. So you need to show extreme caution when you're working with alcohol ink because it is extremely flammable. Do not leave it on your station. Do not leave it by your torches and your heating guns. I have a little spot where I put all of these. And also remember that in a lot of the mixtures, I'm only putting a couple drops of this. So I just needed to say that because yesterday I just kind of threw it on there, blew it with a heating gun, didn't really talk about it because I'm used to it. So then we did, and this is funny, I sat this down because one of the things I did not do yesterday, because I had these sitting on little cups, was kind of, baby it a little. So a lot of times when you see that your design is a little bit watery, you can set take a little Q-tip or a popsicle stick and tilt it just a little to keep it from going off the sides of the coaster. But even though I didn't do that, and you can see the aftermath of that, you can still see how beautiful the effects are. It kept moving, but it still, even while moving, it kept the cells intact. It just stretched them out a little bit. Very neat effect. And this is the Castin'craft with the alcohol ink drops in it. So it's the same as we did here, but I blew it through. So the white line you see here is underneath. So we had a line, we blew it this way, and then it fell this way. And sometimes that gives it a fabulous effect, and sometimes you can do that on purpose. So you do a line, you let it sit there for about a half hour, and then you come back and you just kind of tilt it just a little bit and watch it kind of sink down, and then put it back. And you can see that on some of the waves that in the beach trays that I've done. But this is an extremely neat effect, and I wanted you to see on a surface that has a little bit more mobility versus we're going to just blow a line down. So we've got Castin'craft with a couple drops of alcohol ink. This is just plain alcohol ink. I didn't do any alcohol ink where I just put it in drops on top of this because it's a hot mess usually when you're trying to do show how it looks. And the last but not least, I had taken some acrylic ink for this coaster and I mixed it with this. It was the same mixture, 4 to 6 drops of alcohol ink inside a mixture of acrylic ink for this coaster. And it is strikingly similar effect as the Castin'craft. Castin'craft has a little bit more effects here, but this almost looks like, to me, it looks like clouds. The possibilities with this one are beautiful. And it's kind of funny too, the black and white makes such an extremely different effect than if I would have put this on the blue for, you know, for the beachy effect. It came up to the top exactly like the pigment paste did, but it didn't do anything except make little swipey, I would say smoky, cloudy waves on it. So that's an extreme difference here. You see the same exact resin, the same exact blow technique, the difference between pigment paste and then some acrylic ink mixed with a couple of drops of alcohol. And then this is the Castin'craft, which, as you can see, did a little bit of that effect up at the top. So they're distinctly different effects here, and they're a lot of fun depending on what you want to do with it. And I do know that Castin'craft is it's a colorant for epoxy resins, so it is to some degree pigment paste. But I'm using it because because it has a different overall effect. It's thinner when you put it in, so even if you're using a thicker resin, if you put pigment paste in it, it actually makes what you're working with thicker than this does. But they're both great, and it just kind of depends on what you like working with. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to, you know, do a premiere with it and, you know, be on when it plays. But I want to tell you that my journey in resin has been extremely fun. I didn't expect to have, you know, people following my channel. And I know that a lot of people really want me to start talking, which is a little bit of a challenge for me, but everybody on my channel has been so beautiful. The comments are so uplifting. I mean, I think I have the best followers on any of the channels, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. It helps encourage me to take bigger steps into the tutorials, into talking, into you know, being a little bit more personable with everybody. So thank you everybody for the comments. I have never had such great compliments given by people, you know, so thank you so much, and I will see you next time.